the mainstream discovery of the Americas. In this section of the video, I, as a narrator, will explain the journey of Christopher Columbus, who, by many, is believed to be the first European voyager to reach the American continent. In 1492, three Spanish vessels, La Pinta, La Niña, and La Santa Maria, departed Spanish ports, led by Christopher Columbus, an Italian, in the name of the Crown of Castile and the Gothic kings, in order to find a new route to the Far East for spices and fabrics, but landed finding something else, a continent unknown to the Europeans, which would set the beginning point for the Spanish colonization of the Americas. Western European conquest, large-scale exploration and colonization soon followed. Columbus' first two voyages out of four reached the Bahamas and various Caribbean islands, including Hispaniola, Puerto Rico, and Cuba. In 1497, Italian explorer John Cabot, on behalf of England, landed on the North of American coast, and a year later, Columbus' third voyage reached the South American coast. As the sponsor of Christopher Columbus' voyages, Spain was the first European power to settle and colonize the largest areas, from North America and the Caribbean to the southern tip of South America, the entire continent. Just like that, Spain started their empire in the Caribbean, using, again, islands like Cuba and Puerto Rico as bases. The cost to the indigenous peoples of having the Europeans discovering them was of roughly primarily through the spread of 8 million deaths of indigenous populations, through Afro-Eurasian diseases, and of course manslaughter, for the riches and the land of the indigenous peoples. Some authors have argued this demographic collapse to be the first large-scale act of genocide in the modern era. Juan Ponce de Leon around 1513 and Hernán Cortés later around 1519 and other conquistadores massacred all the indigenous peoples on the way, which would mean centuries of conflicts between the European civilizators and the white man's burden to civilize and take some advantage out of the riches of the peoples and the rightful owners of the land.
In the year 1000, the Vikings still believed that adventuring too far west from Europe by sea was madness, as legend had it at the time that in the Western Sea lived the serpent Jomungandr, and it would eat any ship that would dare sail in that direction. This is one of the main reasons why such culture of sailors and adventurers like the Vikings had never dared voyage too far west, not until Eric and his son Leif's generation. The written reports on history of Leif Erikson's voyages were not officially written down until 3 centuries after he supposedly discovered the American continent. These voyages were written down in the two sagas, the Greenlander saga and the saga of Eric the Red. Leif Erikson's story began way earlier than himself. It began with his father, Eric the Red. Eric the Red was expelled from Norway to Iceland on account of manslaughter, and from a similar incident he was expelled once more to Greenland, where he founded the first settlement and named it that way in an attempt to make it more attractive for the Icelanders to move there. Leif, who at the time was a member of the Norwegian king Olaf Tryggvason court, while with the king, Leif turned to Christianism and was sent to Greenland in a mission to turn these new settlers to Christianity. From here, both sagas differ on what actually happened and the characters and the role they played in the story. The Greenlander saga tells us as Bjorn Herjolfsson, on his way visiting his father in Iceland, was blown off course and ended up in an unknown land with small hills covered with forest, quoted from the text. He decided not to go ashore and it was from his sighting that Leif Erikson decided to go on an expeditionary voyage to this unknown land a few years later. First, Leif and his crew reached a glacier-covered stone slab of land they called Helluland, Stone Land, Stone Slabs Land, what would be Baffin Island nowadays. Then, a flat and forested land they called Markland, Forest Land, nowadays would be the Canadian province of Labrador, to finally reach Vinland, or Wineland, which nowadays is most of Western Canadian province known as Newfoundland, where in the 1960s a Norse archaeologist couple, Helge Ingstad and Anne Stinge Ingstad, discovered the remainings of a Viking settlement. Another theory from the saga of Beric the Red is that Leif was the one blown, of course, on his way to Greenland from Norway under the king's order. He reached a land of self-sown wheat fields and vines, quoted from the text. And from here he goes back to the route towards England, but he sets his mind in coming back to this wonderful land.
As we've seen, the theory of contact between Nordic populations and the American continent is widely accepted as founded. There is an important number of non-mainstream theories, however, which claim to know the true discoverers, so to say, of America. There are claims of contact between Polynesian sailors and the west coast of South America, based mainly on the diffusion of the sweet potato in this region. Another theory, which received wide coverage in the 70s, was brought forward by the Ghanaian-American historian Ivan van Sertima, who asserted that there was evidence of pre-Columbian contact between African populations and the American continent. Other claims suggest pre-Columbian explorations carried out by Irish monks and Chinese delegation. Although these theories are widely contested and criticized, especially for van Sertima's, it is interesting to make a reflection on why such theories arise. In particular, it would be interesting to reflect about what would happen if such theories were confirmed as true. It would bring a massive rethinking of the historic Western dominance, and a subsequent re-evaluation of other societies, which might still suffer from historical subjugation. The fact that African populations arrived to the Americas prior to the slave route would be a source of pride and moral revenge for the African American community and in general African communities.
Following the line of the previous section of this video, Columbus' expedition was not the first to arrive to American land. Well-structured and current theories strongly defend that Vikings had already discovered the continent much before the Europeans. So, taking into consideration this thesis, how come has the Columbus narrative been able to become hegemonic in hardly all the cultures and societies of the globe? In contradiction with the idea that is nowadays extended, during the 15th century, Columbus didn't have good reputation, due to the fact that after leading the expedition that arrived by mistake to America, he demonstrated being a negligent expeditionist leader. But during the next century, he began to emerge from the shadows, reincarnated not so much as a man and a historical figure, but as myth and symbol. The biography that Bartolomé de las Casas and Columbus' son Ferdinand wrote, in mixture with the assessment that the historian Francisco Gómez de Gomara wrote, which is the greatest event since the creation of the world is the discovery of the Indies, consecrated Columbus as a hero and as a unique explorer. Moving now to the 18th century, American Christian clerics such as Samuel Sewell, Jonathan Edwards, and Timothy Dwight began linking the discovery of the Americas to divine prophecies, a fact which also helped to extend the idea of Columbus' narrative as the beginning of modern American history. In similarity with the last exposed points, in the following century, the glorification of Columbus continued after important authors such as Washington Irving and Walt Whitman dedicated long and well-cared poetries to idealize him as an American hero. Also, during the same years, Catholics embraced Columbus as a way to help dismantling the anti-Catholic movement that was taking part in the USA. Without intention of underestimating the importance of the previous points assessed, it is necessary to state that probably the most crucial point for Columbus' narrative becoming as the official version of the discovery of America was in 1938, when President Franklin Roosevelt made Columbus Day a national holiday. We cannot brought up without mentioning that, apart from the historical narrative that during this last part of the video we have used in order to explain how could Columbus' version become the most widespread one, The centuries that followed the arrival of Europeans to America were, among other important events, marked by the fierce colonialism that the powers from Europe carried out around the world. Therefore, as the modern history has been strongly influenced by European colonialism, in addition with the fact that the European arrival in America has become the hegemonic narrative, and taking into strong consideration the well-structured, coherent, and proof-based theories that defend other communities reaching America much before Colon, we feel with enough confidence to state that our thesis has been positively demonstrated. Columbus' expedition was not the first one to have contact with America, but were the Vikings who did it.